Welcome to another session of AIFER English PYQ discussion session. Today we are specifically discussing previous year questions from literary criticism and theory part. So first of all, let us look at the major figures in literary criticism, major theorists, major thinkers in literary criticism, and their major concept. Okay. So here in this sheet, in this PowerPoint presentation, you can see the major figures, the major thinkers and their major ideas. The first one is, of course, Aristotle, and his major poetic work, his major critical work is, of course, poetics, and major concepts are mimesis, catharsis, commercia, unity of action, time, place, 6 elements of tragedy. So these are the major points we have to cover for UGC NET exam. We have to study for UGC NET exam. Mimesis, catharsis, commercia, and there are 6 elements of tragedy, which is unity of action, time, place, and other 6 elements. So when we understand Aristotle, we have to remember that Aristotle's main works are basically a reply to Plato's theory. So in that case, the concepts like mimesis, catharsis, and commercia comes. And we have to remember Aristotle mainly focuses his work on literature based on tragedy, which was the popular genre of at that point of time. Tragedy means the tragic dramas. Tragedy, the dramas which comes under tragedy, is considered as the serious literary genre at that point of time. It was the most popular literary genre as well. So Aristotle was trying to define the tragedy through these concepts like mimesis, catharsis, commercia, and he defines the basic features of tragedy through 6 elements of it. And the second major thinker is Plato. His ideas are mainly compiled in the work of the Republic, and his major idea is poetry as thrice removed from reality or truth. And the idea of divine inspiration, poet as imitator of appearances, these are the main concepts of Plato. So the basic core idea of Plato is, of course, mimesis. And the third major thinker is Longinus and his work on the sublime. Okay. And Longinus comes in the Augustan period around 100, so many years after Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, all these figures. And Longinus' main idea is sublimity or sublime. And Longinus defines 5 sources of sublimity, which are great thought, strong emotion, figures, diction, arrangement. Okay. And the next figure is a British man. He was lived again 100 years, so many years after Longinus. He was an Elizabethan figure. Uh, he lived in the Elizabethan age of Britain, and his major work, his major text is an apology for poetry. He defends poetry as superior to philosophy, history, and he defines poetry as a delightful teaching. He emphasized the didactic purpose of poetry, and he coined, he provided the term golden world for poetic world. And the next person is Samuel Johnson. Again, he lived after so many years of Philip Sidney. His major works are Lives of the Poets, Preface to Shakespeare. These are his major works. And Neoclassical Criticism. He was belonged to Neoclassical period and Neoclassical criticism. And Shakespeare as Mirror of Life was major key, key to understand Samuel Johnson. He, we can say, he popularized the man Shakespeare for the later generations. And he talks about how representation of nature in literary works. The next major figure is Matthew Arnold. He is a Victorian period scholar. His major books are The Function of Criticism and Culture and Anarchy. And he focused criticism as disinterested seeing, and he brought the concept of touchstones. And in his work Culture and Anarchy, he talks about sweetness and light. These are the important concepts we have to study in terms of for UGC NET English exam. And the later figure, I.A. Richards, he is a modern figure, modern scholar, and his major ideas are practical criticism, principles of literary criticism. His major books known in these titles, and his major ideas are clause reading, four kinds of meaning, synthesia, stock responses. These are his major ideas, and he is an important new critical figure. And the next major figure is F.R. Lewis. His important books are The Great Tradition and Revelation. Great Tradition in English novel. He talks about the great figures and their tradition in English novel. He specifically talks about certain writers. They are Jane Austen, George Eliot, James Conrad, D.H. Lawrence. And he talks about their moral seriousness. So, remember, before you go for UGC NET English exam, you must have a thorough idea about all these major scholars, in literary criticism and their major ideas. I have only mentioned some writers, some scholars in this session, because we are going to analyze the questions the questions those come from these figures or their works. Okay, so now we can go to the questions to analyze how the previous year questions were asked in terms of their writing. Let us look at the first question. It was asked in the previous year questions 2018. Aristotle's concept of catharsis in tragedy refers to the climax of dramatic action, the fatal flaw of the tragic hero, the purging or purgation of pity and fear in the audience, the reversal of fortune experienced by the protagonist. So the correct answer is purgation, or the purgation of pity and fear in the audience. So the concept of catharsis is an Aristotelian concept. He brought, like, as I have already told you, catharsis is an important concept of Aristotle. And the literal meaning of the word catharsis means purification. Okay. So in catharsis, Aristotle justifies the very existence of tragedy to the concept of catharsis. Because when we see a tragedy, Plato earlier criticized the tragedy because it arouses unnecessary feelings among audience. Tragedy arouses unnecessary feelings among audience because so it is a silly thing. Poetry is a trivial thing. That's how Plato defines tragedy. On the other hand, Aristotle emphasizes the usefulness, the utility of a tragedy by saying that it is not simply arousing the emotions, rather it purifies the audience. When a man or a woman, he or she watches a tragedy, a tragic drama, it actually helps those men to purify their emotions, purify their feelings. So the emotion that arouses in tragedy actually uh, comes with a purpose. That purpose is Aristotle called the purification, and that process Aristotle calls as catharsis. So I hope you got the idea. Let's look at the explanation. In the Poetics, Aristotle defines tragedy as an imitation of action that through pity and fear affects that catharsis of such emotions. This is the most debated term in classical criticism. It means the audience emotional release. Okay, that is important. It is the emotional release of audience. That's what catharsis. Other key Aristotelian terms are commercia, which means tragic flow, and anagnorisis, which means recognition, and peripetia, which means reversal of fortune, and hubris, excessive pride. Hubris means excessive pride, which happens in King Lear's case. King Lear's tragic flaw was hubris, excessive pride. And Aristotle's six elements of tragedy are plot, character, thought, diction, melody, spectacle. So remember all these points related to Aristotle for the next UGC in English exam. Okay. Now we can go to the second question. The concept of intentional fallacy was proposed by T.S. Eliot and I.A. Richards, W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley, F.R. Lewis and Q.D. Lewis, Northrop Frye, and Cleant Brooks. The correct answer is W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley. So, intentional fallacy is an error of judgment. Okay, what kind of error of judgment intentional fallacy is? It is the error of judgment by judging or analyzing or criticizing a literary text by perceiving the author's interest, by perceiving the author's intention. Okay, so that could be a error of judgment. So new critics like W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley argued for close reading or textual analysis. We have to focus on what is written on the text rather than focuses on the author. So that is the difference. So when you focuses on the author, there will come this error of judgment called the intentional fallacy, because we are going to analyze the intention of the author. But that cannot be the exact case in a fictional text, the work of a novel or a drama or any literary text. So that's what intentional fallacy. And there is also another concept called affective fallacy as well. So let's look at the explanation. W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley proposed the intentional fallacy in 1946, the error of judging a poem by the author's stated intention. They also coined the affective fallacy, judging a poem by its emotional effect on the reader. New criticism advocated close reading of the text itself, the verbal icon. Other key concepts of these persons are paradox, irony, tension, ambiguity. And Cleant Brooks' particular work, the language of paradox, is very important in terms of UGC NET exam. So remember these concepts and new criticism. There are main figures in new criticism. They are Ransom, Cleant Brooks, Robert Warren, William Emerson. Okay, so when you going for UGC NET English exam, you must have to you must have a thorough understanding about these critical figures in new criticism. So remember, these are the major figures in new criticism. Now let's go to next question. Elaine Showalter's term gynocriticism refers to the study of women writers, female creativity, and female literary tradition. This is the correct answer. The study of women's writers. Gynocriticism means study of women's writers, which means female creativity and female literary tradition. Showalter proposed gynocriticism in toward a feminist poetics. That work is important, which is published in 1979. As a distinct critical mode of focused on women as writers rather than women as readers. So it explores a female literary tradition, women's creativity and psychology, and, and the psychology or sociology or politics of female authorship. She contrasted this with feminist critique, reading male text against the grain. Her key work is A Literature of Their Own, praising British women's fiction from Bronte to Lessing. So remember, here I told some important works of Elaine Showalter. One is Towards a Feminist Poetics, which is published in 1979, and the other work is A Literature of Their Own, published in 1977. These are the important works. And gynocratism is a term coined by Elaine Showalter, which focuses on the study of women as writers. Okay, we know there are different phases for feminist movement in literature. Okay, there was a feminine phase. Before that, there was female phase, feminine phase, and then there was this phase that includes gynocratism, women as writers and women as readers. So the concept of gynocratism is very important, and the other works of Elaine Showalter's are very important. So remember all these points. The next question, Mikhail Bakhtin's concept of heteroglossia refers to the coexistence of multiple languages in a bilingual text, the diversity of social voices and languages within a novel, the hidden author's voice beneath the narrator's voice, the translation of a text across different cultural contexts. Heteroglossia refers to, the correct answer is the diversity of social voices and languages within a novel. So that what heteroglossia. So remember, Mikhail Bakhtin's important concept is heteroglossia, which refers different voices come together in a novel or in a literary text. Okay, in a novel there will be different characters from different social background. They will have different social perspectives, and all these social perspective, all these different background, all these different voices come together in a novel, and that's what Mikhail Bakhtin called the concept of heteroglossia. Okay, that's what the idea of heteroglossia. Different voices and languages comes in a novel. So that's what heteroglossia. So we will get different perspective, different ideas, different backgrounds, different voices, different languages within a novel. That's what heteroglossia. So it is the celebration of diversity. Okay, it is the celebration of diversity. Bakhtin's heteroglossia in discourse in the novel refers to the multiplicity of social voices and their interactions in the novel form. The novel is inherently dialogic. Voices compete and interact rather than being unified. So that's what it. The novel is inherently dialogic. Okay. Voices compete and interact rather than being unified. The related concepts are polyphony, multiple independent voices in Dostoevsky's novel. That's also important. Polyphony is particularly related to Dostoevsky's novels. And carnival, again, a related concept. It is the subversion of official culture. Okay. In a carnival, it is the subversion of official culture or the dominant culture. And chronotop means the time-space relationship. And Bakhtin's work was rediscovered in the West in the 1970s and 80s. So, Mikhail Bakhtin is an important figure in literary criticism. His main idea is heteroglossia, and his other ideas are polyphony, carnival, chronotop, and all these concepts are important. Okay. And his work, the discourse in the novel, is also very important. Now we can go. Next question, Northrop Frye's Anatomy of Criticism classifies literature using Marxist class analysis applied to literary genres, four narrative archetypes based on seasonal cycles, Freudian stages of psychological development, Saussurean binary oppositions between signifier and signified. So the correct answer is four narrative archetypes based on seasonal cycles: comedy, romance, tragedy, irony, or satire. So in the anatomy of criticism, Northrop Frye segregates different genres to different seasonal cycles: comedy, romance, tragedy, irony, and satire. So the romance equates with summer, tragedy equates with autumn, and irony or satire equates with winter. So this is how Northrop Frye classifies genres with different seasonal cycles. So Northrop Frye's Anatomy of Criticism proposes a systematic literary criticism based on myth and archetype. The four mythoi, that term is important, the four mythoi, narrative archetypes correspond to the four seasons. Okay, which are comedy is equal to spring, ascent or and integration uh, of the character or the hero in the text. Okay, that's what the comedy. And romance equates summer, the quest and adventure, the hero's adventure. Okay, that is the rising action in a drama or a literary text. And tragedy equates autumn, that is fall of action or fall and isolation. And irony or satire equates with winter, which is the dissolution and alienation. Okay, that's the end part of a literature, novel, or drama. So Northrop Frye drew on Jung's archetypes and praises the golden bough. He also distinguished modes by the hero's power relative to ordinary humans. Okay, that's also important. Freud drew on Carl Jung's archetypes and uh, praises the golden bough. These are the important works related to Northrop Frye's Anatomy of Criticism. Next question. Gianfranco Francois Lyotard or Gianfrancois Lyotard defined postmodernism as incredulity toward traditional religious narratives, grand narratives, empirical scientific method, psychoanalytic theories of the unconscious. So the answer is grand narratives, which means meta narratives of progress and liberation. So Lyotard actually rejects or minimalizes the concepts like grand narratives or meta narratives. Lyotard's actually inaugurated postmodernism as a discourse, as an academic discourse, or as an intellectual project. Okay. So in the postmodern condition, which was the inaugural text of postmodernism written by Lyotard, Lyotard defines postmodernism as incredulity towards meta-narratives, the collapse of totalizing explanatory systems like Enlightenment, progress, Marxism, Christianity, or Hegelian dialectics. Postmodern literature features pastiche, parody, intertextuality, metafiction, technology. So these are the important concepts related to postmodern literature: pastiche, parody, intertextuality, metafiction, unreliable narrators, and fragmented chronology. And key postmodern writers are Pynchon, Delilo, Vonnegut, Calvino, Rushdie, Nabokov, Frederick Jameson, and Baudrillard. The Frederick Jameson and Baudrillard are key Marxist and post-structuralist theorists of postmodernism. So remember, postmodernism is an important part in UGC NET English exam as part of literary criticism and theory. And Lyotard is an important figure in terms of postmodernism, and his work, The Postmodern Condition, which was published in 1979, is an important work of Lyotard. And in the main idea that in that book Lyotard put forth is the incredulity towards meta narratives or grand narratives. and rather instead of meta narratives or grand narratives, he celebrates little narratives. So these are the important concept of Lyotard's postmodernism. So with this, okay, let's look at one more question, and with that we can wind up. The term eco-criticism was popularized by which critics' work? Raymond Williams, The Country and the City, Cyril Broadfelty in the Eco-Criticism Reader, Lawrence Buell in The Environmental Imagination. Both Cyril Broadfelty and Lawrence Buell both are foundational. So the correct answer is eco-criticism was popularized by both Cyril Broadfelty and Lawrence Buell in their works, The Eco-Criticism Reader and Lawrence Buell's The Environmental Imagination. These both works are important in terms of eco-criticism, and they popularized the very term eco-criticism. So remember that. And Raymond Williams, The Country and City, is another important work in cultural studies, okay, in which he describes about the features of country and city and its historical and cultural importance. So eco-criticism examines the relationship between literature and the physical environment. Cheryl Godfelty's The Eco-Criticism Reader systematized the field. Lawrence Buell's The Environmental Imagination analyzed thorough and environmental writing. The Association for the Study of Literature and Environment was founded in 1992. That's important. And key concepts in eco-criticism are bioregionalism, nature writing, past tradition, post-humanism. So these are important. So with this, we can wind up this session. I hope you got some important ideas for your coming UGC NET English exam. I wish you all the best. And remember, practice more questions and find out more explanation of that questions. That will help a lot for your UGC NET English exam. So PYQ practicing are very important. With that note, let me conclude this session. Once again, I wish you all the best. When you're preparing for UGC NET English exam, you have to focus on PYQs because your questions are important key to understand the patterns of the question and understand the syllabus well and understand how the questions are being asked. So these are important things, and prepare well for the coming UGC NET English exam. Preparation is very important because we have a huge syllabus before us and we have to cover a lot of topics. So practice thoroughly and focus. Identify your weak areas and focus on your studying. Thank you and goodbye.